Get the restream running. There we are. Good evening, social media. Evening, everybody. Welcome. Great to see you all. This Thursday evening, this cold Thursday evening here in Pittsburgh. Good evening. Welcome to Veterans Breakfast Club, Greatest Generation Live for Thursday, December 12th. My name is Sean Hall. I'm the Director of Programming with the VBC. And for those of you who may be new to us, we are a here in Western PA, and our mission is creating communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. We've been doing that for 16 years, and we're excited here in a couple of weeks to start our 17th year. Host tonight for our Greatest Generation Live is Glenn Flickinger. Glenn, how are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you, Sean. Another great Thursday night coming up.
Did you think when we began doing Thursday nights at the beginning of this year that we would get all the way through? You only have this one and next week, and that's a whole year of your show.
I never anticipated doing as many programs as we've done.
Or maybe meeting as many amazing people, veterans and authors and historians, and as we've had, right?
That's been the real fun of it all. I see a lot of faces on tonight that we've had on in the past. I'm going to welcome some of them in a couple of minutes here. And that has been the most fun. This theme of the air war over Europe, which was just a figment of my imagination a year ago. In fact, it was about a year ago that we interviewed the author of Masters of the Air, Don Miller. And it was from that, and then knowing that the Masters of the Air program start date, that we began this series of programs on the air war over Europe. So yeah, a lot of really great people, a lot of very knowledgeable people, and we're just really grateful to have had such fun and learned so much over the past year.
Excellent.
So should we get, we'll get started. Okay.
Let's kick her off.
Okay.
As they say.
So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Glenn Flickinger. I host this almost every Thursday night program called Greatest Generation Live, real catchy term that we came up with. And for the past year, we have probably spent 75% of our programming on the air war over Europe. And that was started because of the Masters of the Air series. And we thought we'd do a few programs, and here we are in December. And I imagine if I counted them up, we've done 30 programs on the air war over Europe. And we've touched on some other subjects as well. So we've begun in the fall to vary that a little bit. Next week, we have the 80th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge story. A few weeks ago, we had the 80th anniversary of the Hurtgen Force. So we've gone away from doing 100% air war, if you will. But we keep coming back to it. And tonight's program is, as everybody knows, on the B-26 Marauder. And that came about, and I see a very friendly face on screen, at least I did a little bit ago, Steve Snyder. Steve, are you there? If you see him, could you unmute him for me, Sean?
Gotcha, Steve. There you go.
I can't hear him.
Steve,
we can hear you. Steve, can you hear us? No? We can hear you. Maybe you talk.
No?
Well, we unmuted Steve, but I don't know. Steve is having mic troubles, it seems.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if we can solve that. But it was Steve who introduced me to three of our guests tonight, Nick Cressy, Josh Muri, and Ron Bolesta. So I have to thank Steve for that. And the thought behind this that came from Steve was that we've spent most of our programming on talking about the B-17, the B-24, the fighter planes, the P-47. We've had Ed Cottrell on many times. We had a Tuskegee Airman on about the P-51, but we totally left out the story of the B-26. It was Steve who brought it to our attention and introduced me to these gentlemen from the B-26 society they have. And I've learned a tremendous amount now about the B-26. In fact, more than likely, tonight is going to be B-26 Part 1, and we're going to do a Part 2 sometime early next year because there's so many great stories to be told. And that's kind of what we're all about in the Veterans Breakfast Club, is telling the stories of our veterans. And tonight, we have 4 people that we're going to feature, and then we have some of our color commentators, I'll call them, or I see their faces. They're with us as well. But let me introduce the 4 speakers. We have Ron Bolesta. Ron, I'm going to ask you to unmute and just say hello. And
Hi, Ron Bolesta here. Yes.
And Ron, give us 30 seconds on your background and why you're so interested in B-26.
I've been flying model airplanes and building remote control model airplanes for a long time. I did that with my father. He flew a B-26 and was shot down as a POW. And I met with a friend of mine and introduced me to a first generation Marauder man. And that's how I got involved with the B-26 Marauder Historical Society.
Right. And we're going to get to your father's story tonight for sure.
Yes, thank you.
And then we have Josh Muri. Josh, how are you tonight?
Good evening. I'm doing great. Ron failed to mention he's our vice president of the Marauder Historical Society. Okay. And somehow they roped me into being president. My grandfather was a B-26 pilot at the Battle of Midway. We'll talk about it a little bit. And just told great stories as I was growing up. And I'm also now an Air Force veteran. And so it's always been an honor to think about him and tell his story.
And then we have Nick Cressy. Nick, please say hello and give us a little background.
Yes, my background with the B-26 group is my uncle, my mother's older brother, flew B-26s with 320th Bomb Group out of the 12th Air Force from the middle of 1944 until he was killed in action in 1945. And I did a lot of research on him, wanted to put out the story about him to my family at least, and I wrote a book about him. I think we can talk about it a little later on. And there's Glenn is showing the cover of that.
There's the book. Great.
Excellent. Right, but I have 5 uncles that were in World War II, and my uncle Nick Bentis, Staff Sergeant, was the only one that did not make it home. But I have a profound interest in World War II history, especially aviation history.
And it's possible, probably likely, that Nick's story of his uncle and his book is going to be our Part 2 in the early part of next year. And that's because we have a very special guest tonight who I'd like him to say hello for right now. And that's Willie Williamson, who is a World War II veteran, a B-26 crewman, originally from Texas. And if I could ask you, we got to ask him to unmute. Ron or Danny, could you have him unmute, please?
I don't want to double click you, Glenn, so I'll wait. There you go.
There you go. Hello, Mr. Williamson. How are you tonight?
Okay.
Okay, great.
I'm doing pretty good.
You're looking pretty good for what? You're 64 now?
What?
101, right? Do I have that right?
101.
101. Congratulations, Mr. Williamson. And thank you so very much for being on with us tonight.
Yeah.
If we could just ask you to wait about 5 minutes, we're going to do just a little bit of information about the B-26 in general, because we have a very educated audience, but not too many, or many of them are like me, who have just a very sort of background knowledge of the B-26. So give us about 5 minutes to introduce the B-26, who's the star of the program, the other star, I should say, and then we'll introduce you and ask you a few questions. Okay. So, and Steve, did you ever solve your problems there? I asked you to
Let me
unmute.
see if I can find Steve again.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
fixed
restarted
it.
my computer, so I'm back. I now have audio.
Good to see you again, Steve. It's been a while.
Yeah, I was talking to my friend Ken Parley, who, was just bragging away about your trip to England.
Oh, great. Yeah. Ken and his wife, his son, was it Chase?
Chase, yeah, Chase, yeah,
Yeah, they were a real pleasure to have along.
yeah. He can't stop raving about it. So good
Great.
job.
Well, thank you. I'm glad we lived up to your expectation. I found that a pub a night keeps everybody happy.
There you go. As long as there's beer at the end of the day.
There you go. Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much for introducing the B-26 and the B-26 Historical Society to us. So
My pleasure. Yeah,
this-
I've attended a couple of their reunions and presented there. They're a good group.
Great, great. So let me share the screen here, and we're just going to do a short introduction here of the B-26. Okay. Are we seeing that okay?
Colina.
I can see your home or your background of your main computer, but I don't see a power there. PowerPoint's up.
There, PowerPoint's up now.
Yeah, but it's not set to full screen.
Let me do that over again. My apologies.
Great to see everybody this evening. Ben, I think that would you be our like #1 fan, would you say, on Thursday nights, given your history? Like, you've been with us all year on Thursday nights, but this is really just sat in your sweet spot, like every topic we've covered every Thursday night. I feel like that's the case, Ben.
You're asking Ben, right?
Ben, right? Yeah.
Yeah, repeat the question for me again, please.
I said this has kind of been your sweet spot, Thursday nights, covering the air war. And
Oh, absolutely.
I figure you've just been itching for Thursday nights this whole year.
You bet. Yeah, I've enjoyed all of it.
Okay, now do I have it up correctly?
We do. We see it.
Okay. Okay. Here's our 4 guests for the night. We may not get to Nick, probably won't, and he'll be part 2. B-26, 2-engine medium bomber, right? Flew more than 110,000 sorties in World War II. Dropped 150,000 tons of bombs, 5,200 odd manufactured. It's a great picture of a B-26B bomber in flight. B-26s were flown by the United States primarily, but also Great Britain, France, 2 or 3 other countries. It was quite a widely known bomber. There is one aspect of it that a couple of you asked me. Ben, you were one, about it, this moniker that it earned early in the war. It started production in November of 1940, really, coming into play in 41 and 42. And there were problems in the early couple of years. I don't know, any of our guests, Nick, Josh, or Ron, do you have an understanding of what the problems were and how they were solved? Are we losing them?
They were runaway propellers. You had a high wing load. The wings were real short. It's kind of built like a hot rod, and it was kind of hard to handle if you didn't know what to do with it. So that's why it was kind of hard to control. Doolittle determined that it wasn't enough training on it for the pilots, but they did extend the wings, adjusted the rudder and the dihedral angle on the elevator in the back, and that kind of took care of some of the problems. But mainly it was training, getting the right training done.
Yeah, I read a great story online about it that Glenn Curtiss from Curtiss Aircraft was called in front of Truman's committee. Truman had that committee during the war about the production of military equipment, and it was only then that Glenn Curtiss agreed to make the changes in the wings. That Truman really scolded him and threatened to cancel the contract. Another great Harry Truman story. As you can tell, I like Harry Truman. Josh, did you want to say something? Josh?
You're muted.
Oh, let's unmute Josh. Are you there, Sean, to unmute? I'll get it. There you go, John.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to add on to what Nick was saying, obviously my grandfather was in the first phase of that with the shorter wings, but I think there was a big story there that one a day in Tampa Bay, which had all the problems with the early models. And there's stories that it was Doolittle who went down, took a flight, and then gave the feedback that we need more training for these pilots. There's nothing wrong with the airplane. That's the big story about how that kind of turned. And then they started doing some different kind of training.
Right. And for the audience benefit, Josh's grandfather joined the U.S. Army Air Force in the late 30s and was flying B-26s or a crew with the B-26 at the Battle of Midway. So we're going to get to that story a little later. I found this picture. I can't remember where I got it. I just loved it. I just, what a great close-up. I don't know how they did this, but you see four of the crewmen. You see the fella in the, I guess that's the nose of the aircraft. I'm guessing he's the bombardier. Do I have that right, gentlemen?
Yes.
Yeah. And you see him taking a drag on his cigarette. It's 1940 something. That was, everybody did it every day, all day long. You see the pilot, co-pilot, and I'm guessing that's the top turn gunner / engineer in the middle.
Yes.
Yeah. How many crewmen on a B-26?
Typically 6.
6. So these 4 plus what? A tail gunner and a waist gunner?
Yes. And sometimes they'd have a spare, you know, a photographer or an extra hand somehow, but it was typically 6 and maybe 1 extra, depending on the mission.
So unlike the 17s and 24s, back to this diagram picture, there was no ball turret gunner on a B-26.
No, just the top turret.
Yeah. Nor were there waist gunners, open waist gunners like there is in the 24 and 17.
Well, there was on later models, and they were kind of open ports with 2 guns pointing downward to kind of take care of the lower 6 of the aircraft.
Okay.
So there was certainly evolution over the time, and guns were added, many guns added over time. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it expected, like the B-17, to protect itself without fighter cover?
Yes, because the speed of the B-26 was actually faster than most of the fighters. So they were expected to outrun and or protect themselves.
Mm-hmm. And did that prove to be the fact? Could they outrun the German fighters?
Yeah, and the Japanese. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Deployed to all theaters of the war. Right.
Yes.
This, I wanted to put this up, the B-26 Marauder Historical Society. You guys want to just comment on that a little bit and the work that you've done?
Ron should handle that one.
He's the president.
He's vice president, but he knows all of this stuff here. He's all over this.
You delegate well, Josh.
Is Ron unmute?
You're mute, Ron.
I may have lost my wingman there.
I know.
There we go.
There
we go. Good. Yeah. So the question again was
just a little bit of background on the Historical Society.
Yeah, it's probably been around since about 1990 or so. They got together and they formulated the society, and you know, just small groups of from all the various bomb groups got together and, you know, fellowship and talk about this and talk about that, and it just kind of just blossomed. So that's how I got involved with it, because I reached out and going, who the heck is around here? You know, after meeting a first generation Marauder guy and actually being invited to go to a reunion down in Savannah and go see the 8th Air Force and stuff like that. That was really nice. So that's kind of how it all grew. They've been around for a good while.
Yeah.
But Ron's being modest there. He's done a lot of research on a lot of the bomb groups, especially a couple of flak baits and stuff. And so we do a lot of research. We have historians. We know a lot of the involvement of the people, the places, as your slide is saying. And, we try to provide people with information on their family members as best we can. And we are looking for, contributions to do big things. We have some projects and ideas we're working on in the future as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on with our society.
Yeah, our historian has got over 1 million pages of documents that he has in his possession. And I've done numerous 600-hour research projects for the organization.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been fun and a labor of love.
Todd or Sean, if I could ask you just to put that B-26 Historical Society URL in the chat for anybody who might want to check it out. Would you do that for us, please?
B-26 Historical Society.
No, B-26, B-26MHS.org. It's right on the screen there.
I will get it for everyone. So
before we go to Mr. Williamson, let me come back to this picture, which I just like. I think I'm going to have this blown up and put in on my wall somewhere. I saw Colin Heaton on earlier. Colin, are you still on? Could we unmute Colin?
Yes, just found Colin. There you go.
Yeah, I'm here, guys. How's it going?
Colin, how are you tonight? Thank you for being on again.
No, no problem. By the way, Curtis LeMay told me a few things about the B-26 that might be of interest.
Yeah, tell us. What did Curtis LeMay think of the B-26?
I thought it was a great aircraft, actually. He said that he agreed with Doolittle. It was a training issue more than likely. He test flew a couple of them. And, he said it's kind of like compared to a B-27, B-24 or 17 or whatever. He said, if I remember correctly, he said flying a B-26 was like going from a limousine into a Corvette, but you didn't have the braking capacity.
It go fast, but you had a hard time slowing it down, to put it in layman terms.
Yeah, that's what he was saying.
Interesting. Yeah. And the B-26, of course, I should have mentioned this earlier, was deployed as a tactical fighter. Unlike the B-17, the B-24, the B-29 eventually, were strategic fighters. So that meant that it was going after, it flew at what, 10, 12,000 feet for the most part. It was unpressurized, just like the heavy bombers. But it was going after bridges, going after troop concentrations, etc. In fact, for the most part, as the war went on, the B-26s were part of the 9th Air Force and the 12th Air Force in Europe anyway, which were the tactical air forces. So Colin, the question I wanted to bring you in for was, I think, was it last month you mentioned, last week, you mentioned how the German Luftwaffe fighter pilots really detested having to go after B-17s because they were so heavily armored. Was there any consensus from the Luftwaffe about the B-26?
No, I know that Adolf Galland shot down one when he fired his rockets. Some of the German pilots shot him down. They didn't have any real concerns about them. It's just that if you hit them head on, they were faster than the 4-engine bombers, so they kind of had to adjust. And many of them would fire but miss because the closing speed was faster than they anticipated. So they would have to really try to come around and get a flank shot or a rear shot. But no, I don't have any detrimental or positives other than that with regard to the Luftwaffe perspective.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that it was, hard for them to adjust from the big, heavy, slow targets to this faster, stealthier is not the right word, but faster, zippier target, let's say. More maneuverable too, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know for a fact that one of my German pilots got into a turning dogfight with a B-26, and he actually took defensive fire and had to break off contact, so he didn't shoot it down.
Wow. Yeah, for those of you who might not know Colin was the historical consultant to the Masters of the Air on the German Luftwaffe. You cannot ask Colin a question about the German Luftwaffe that he cannot answer. So we love having Colin on. He's given us a lot of great knowledge and background over the last year. Thank you, Colin.
No problem.
So let's we're going to turn now to talking to Willie Williamson. Before we do, as I was looking around, I found this great piece of propaganda. If I was 18 years old and wanted to go to war and saw this, yeah, man, let's go join the U.S. Army Air Force and jump in a B-26. All right, just a fascinating recruiting poster featuring the B-26. Okay, any questions before we go to interviewing Mr. Williamson? Anything in the chat we should address, Sean?
Yeah, there's something we should dispel about B-26s and A-26s. The B-26s were a World War II plane, and then after World War II, they were destroyed and decommissioned. So anything after World War II, you're almost 99.9% referring to an A-26 Invader, not a B-26 Marauder.
Okay, I've heard of the A-26, did not know that distinction.
It was renamed B-26 years after that, but it's commonly confused because of that. But they kind of almost look similar, but they are not the same airplane.
Sean, anything we should address? Anybody in the audience so far with a question or comment?
Yeah, Brad in the chat. I would like to know the logic in naming these aircraft, as in B-17, B-24, B-25. Were they named in sequence of development? And today, obviously, we have the B-1 and B-2.
It's a great question, and I have not a clue. So I'm hoping somebody else does. Anybody? Anybody? Brad, you've stumped us. Colin,
We'll have that for the next Jeopardy.
Yeah. I always thought the B stood for bomber, right?
It does. Yes.
That I knew, but why? I mean, clearly the B-17 and all these World War II bombers came around long before the B-1 and B-2 did. So I don't know why we went backwards. No clue. Brad, we'll look that up and have something for you. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'd like, oh yes, something else.
There is two more questions. Let's see here. Dave Seaver, given the problems with the early models, high wing loading, fast landing speed, etc., didn't the B-26 also earn the nickname Baltimore Whore?
Yes, there were many crazy nicknames for the B-26 because of that. Yes.
And Marcia commented that there were other names for it too, including the flying prostitute.
That's right.
Well, this is a family program, so
yes.
I thought Widowmaker was as far as we had to go.
Bob Barnbargen asked, what was the normal cruise speed?
The early clip model wings, the takeoff landing speed was somewhere around 150 miles an hour. So it was crazy, especially on landing with some of the pilots that had come out of school with planes of much slower speeds. The published maximum speed is 280, but we know quite well that it went much faster than that, 315 or more. Cruise speed probably almost 250, 280, I would imagine.
All right, those are the questions in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Mr. Williamson, could I ask you to say hello again for us?
I may have lost his window. Let me see if I can find him.
Okay. We should maybe ask him to unmute again.
There he is. Found him.
Okay. And is he unmuted?
Not quite yet. There we go.
How about now?
Yep.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Williamson. Can you see the screen? Can you see the picture that's up on the screen? Who is that young man?
That's me.
I thought so. Pretty handsome guy from Texas.
Yeah.
When was this taken? Do you remember?
You remember when that picture was taken?
I don't remember exactly, but
Pretty
sometime in
early.
40, early late 42 or early 33.
Yeah. And I've got another one here of you. Now, if you want to blame anybody, talk to your daughter. She sent me these. This I imagined a little bit later in the war, perhaps.
Yeah, that was probably January 44.
Right, right. So in reading about you, Mr. Williamson, you graduated from high school in 1941, and you reported for duty to the Army Air Corps in Houston in 1943, and you went on to training. And
Yes.
you were trained as an engineer and top turret gunner. Do I have that correct?
Were you top gunner? What, were you a top gunner?
Yeah, I can't understand what he's saying.
Are you still there?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
here.
What was your position? What do you? You're a top gunner. Can you hear?
Yeah, we can hear. Yeah, he was the top turret
No,
gunner.
I was wondering if he could hear.
Oh yeah. You able to hear me?
Did the top turret?
Yeah, I can hear you.
What did it feel like being in that top turret gun position?
What did it feel like being at the top of the plane, not be able to see the ground? You understand it?
Well, listen, Mr. Williams.
They were asking what it felt like to be on top of the plane in your position.
Well, you get to see a lot of sky from the top of the plane. You can't see the ground.
Did you see a few German fighter planes?
Do what?
Did you see a few planes, German planes, from there?
Well, we could see what was flying. When we went up, usually it's 36 planes, only one mission, one target. And we usually flew to number 4 position in the flight of 18 planes, or 16, whatever it was. Which is number 4 is out underneath the lead plane.
Let me show you a picture of the plane that you flew in. Blind date.
Yeah, that's my the blind date. That's her, and that's the ground crew that maintained it.
Who came up with the name Blind Date, Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Was that your name? Did you name it Blind Date or someone else in your crew?
Who named the plane?
No, I didn't name it. The pilot and a co-pilot, I think the radio man at that time was done most of the work on the plane.
You recognize these men, Mr. Williamson?
There's pictures there. The pilot, Bob McCarthy.
You're in the
The
middle.
co-pilot at that time, Mr. Loudon, was the third man over. And the other guy was the new bombardier. I don't remember his name, but that's me, and then the radio man and the tail gunner.
Now, is this one you here that I'm circling?
He's third from the right.
Third from the,
Now I see. Yes.
There.
Now I see.
I'll be fourth from the right. No, third from the right, yeah.
Yeah. There you are.
Co-pilot got his hand over my shoulder.
Yes, I see. I see. So we wanted to get to the what happened to you in 1944. I think it was December the 23rd, 1944. You and your crew were on a mission. Somebody sent me this. I don't know, Josh, is there something significant?
Well,
That's the Eiffel
first
Tower.
flying day we had in 15 days, and we took off, and the Germans were waiting on us when we didn't even get airborne good till they attacked us. We lost 100 and something planes that day, and the Germans lost their Air Force. I never flew another combat mission after December the 23rd.
And that was your 65th mission.
That was my 65th mission, yes.
You would have gone
And
home.
less. Yeah, I was packed and ready to be in New York for New Year's.
And Josh, maybe you can help me with this. Why 65 missions? The heavy bombers at that time the limit was 35 missions. Why were the medium bombers, the B-26s, at 65?
I don't have any reason why, or at least I don't know any reason why they set it at 65.
Yeah, I don't have that answer either, but
It was about 1,200 hours in there.
yeah, instead of going home that day, Mr. Williamson there had to march 30 days in the snow to a freedom camp. So
Yeah. This was the target that they were going after that day.
that railroad bridge there, and right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And when he was shot down. And how many of your crew survived besides you, Mr. Williamson?
3 of us survived and 3 went down.
And what happened to you? Why did they march you around for so long at that time? Do you know? How long did they march you around to different cities?
When you were captured, why did they march you around every day?
Trying to take care of us.
Was there no place to put you at that time? It was just
We had no prison camp there handy.
Yeah, they already released the prison camp, and Ellie was part of a big crew, and even the guards were taking care of the guards. Yeah.
Yeah.
When we got down to Nuremberg, the captain of the Nuremberg prison camp, where we had English prisoners and Irish, I don't know, all kinds of people there to prison camp there. And the German in charge of the camp, he told us if we'd stay together and do the best we could, that he would take the best care of us that he could. But if any of us wanted to escape, we could go to them. And he don't have the men to stop us, but he said the SS troops wasn't taking prisoners anymore. So that kind of put the fear in everybody, and we stayed put.
Yeah. Josh, you told me a story about Mr. Williamson in that something about he carried one of the German guards' rifles for a while.
Yeah, he told great stories to us.
Well, that's later when we were prisoners, and had matches marching 4 abreast, and me and 2 other guys, we got lazy and got behind the day, and so German fella, he was in his early 80s, and he was our guard, but he couldn't keep up with the thing, so we stayed back with him, and we carried his gun for him, and we go to share a Red Cross parcel with him. It was a real nice man, and I think he was 80-something years old then, and there was no young people there. They were all kids or men, old men.
Yeah. All
able-bodied German men were in our service, and most of them never got home. They shipped them to Russia and everywhere else. It was really a sad situation.
You remember this picture here? This is your POW picture.
Yes,
This is after you'd been marched around for a month or more, and you make
Yeah.
it to Stalag 7.
that picture was taken on Easter 44.
Mhm.
And we got captured before that. And they gave us a can of cheese between two people, and they gave us a blanket for two people. They gave us a loaf of life, black bread for three people. And that was our Christmas.
How much did you weigh when you got captured?
I weighed 180 when I got shot down. And then Valentine's Day, I weighed 118.
Wow.
Willie, what did you eat on the way on the path when you were marching? What did you have? What they feed you as you marched through the snow?
Just keep it walking.
What did you eat? What did they feed you?
About the only thing they furnished us was water.
How about you eating grass?
And they didn't have any food either. The Germans didn't have any of the people at home. They had to eat grass and do whatever they could to survive too, because they had consumed all their living things for the army. The German army took everything from that was able to move.
So they furnished water, but you were pretty much eating grass and whatever you could find.
Well, all we got was left. They peeled potatoes to make mashed potatoes for their troops. So they'd throw the peeling away. We go get them and boil them and make potato peelings, dinner out of them.
Once you reached Stalag 7A, was the food better? Was the situation better for you?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah.
Patton was down there, so they got better.
And you remember when you were liberated, when you were freed? What happened when you were at the end of the war? What happened to the men in the camp and you?
And nothing. We were organized with squadrons and regular army. We were same as in the army when we was in the prison camp there.
Yeah, what I meant.
Commanding officers and people in charge made a formal what do you call it? Surrender.
Formal
The
surrender.
Germans did, and they brought their guns up and they presented them to the guys there, and they put them in the stack, and they made a formal surrender right there with Patton, and there was, I think, 17 of us in one bunch that we had set up Army style. Commanding officer and second lieutenant was in charge, and made very formal out of it, and come out good.
Yeah, you survived. One last question, Mr. Williamson. How long until you got back to the United States after you were liberated from being a POW?
Well, they first took us to coast of Spain, and we stayed there, I think, 3 weeks. They made us 5 meals a day, getting us fattened up. And we got on Liberty ship from France to New York, handling New Jersey there. And it seemed like it was about 3 weeks on the sea. I can remember going in the engine room of that old ship, and it had a one-cylinder engine. Sitting in the shaft running to the back, turning, you could see it turning. Although we're never going to get there.
Imagine you were one very happy man to
deliver the ship.
Yeah.
I might have built them for the war. But they made it. Nobody complaining.
Everybody very happy, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Happy we're going home.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Williamson, let me stop here and just thank you for taking the time to be on tonight. It's an honor to have you on our program. You're a hero to all of us Veteran Breakfast Club members and the other people that are on with us tonight. And we wish you the best. And please stay on. We're going to keep talking about the B-26.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Willie. Nice seeing you.
Nice seeing you, Willie.
Thank you. Let me ask Marilyn Walton to come on next. Marilyn, I saw you earlier. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
No, Marilyn Walton.
Oh.
Sorry. Really.
I asked Marilyn to unmute. There we go.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, Marilyn. It's been so long since we've seen you.
Well, it's good to be back. I heard the word POW, and you know how I react to that. My father, Mr. Williamson, was also liberated with you at Stalag 7A that same day. So I'm familiar with a lot of the stories from there. Yeah, it was quite an experience you went through.
Stalag 7A was Mooseburg. Is that right?
It was in Mooseburg. It was a camp that was initially started in September of 1939, and it held 10,000 Polish prisoners of war. That's why the Germans built it in 1939, and then it evolved over the years to hold all kinds of different prisoners until at the end it was just so overcrowded. It had so many prisoners in it from all nationalities, and I'm sure that Mr. Williamson remembers the raising of the flag there on Liberation Day and how happy they all were.
So that is the camp that is portrayed in the Masters of the Air series.
Right at the end. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right at the end.
Yeah.
With the big wooden tower.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So how unusual is Mr. Williamson's story in that he was shot down in late 1944? He's never taken to, what was the interrogation camp?
Dulagluft.
Yeah, he was never taken there.
Right.
Just sort of marched around what sounded like for 4 or 5 weeks, and then ends up at Stalag 7A.
Yeah, that's when you had a lot of people pouring in there from all different camps, enlisted men, officers, all different nationalities. There was a lot of confusion. The Germans really didn't know what to do with all these men. And so they ended up crowding them, so many of them, into the camp in Mooseburg. And any man that was shot down that late in the war usually didn't go to the interrogation center because the Germans were quickly leaving it and burning records as they went. And there was no really reason. At that point, they knew they had lost the war. There was no reason to interrogate these men. They knew the war would be over soon. So that's why he never really went to Oberusel, where the camp was. Yeah. That part's not unusual at all at the end of the war. Yeah. And even the men that came into where my dad was, Stalag 3, ones that got there late in the war, they were living with the British in the camp. Everything was just overcrowded at that point.
Right. And it's so well depicted, portrayed, illustrated in the Masters of the Air series. If Mr. Williamson hasn't had a chance to see that, I'd love for his caretakers there, Ron and Danny, to get him to at least look for the last of the episodes. I think it's episode 7, Marilyn.
Yeah, it was kind of the last 3 they were getting into towards going to Mooseburg.
Yeah.
Yeah, the very last one has the most, the liberation of Mooseburg.
Right. Yeah, for those of you who might not know Marilyn from our many previous programs with her, she's been very generous with the Veterans Breakfast Club. Marilyn was the historical consultant to Masters of the Air for the POW scenes and history and so forth. So
Right.
I call her my POW walking encyclopedia.
That's a nice compliment. There was a lot of research that went into all of that, even before that, doing books and everything. So it just carried over to movies.
Thank you.
Colin well knows.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Marilyn. What I'd like to do now, it's 10 to 8. We still have time for at least one more story, if not 2. I'd like to move on to Ron Bolesta and the story of his father. And the interesting thing about Ron Bolesta's story is that, or Ron Bolesta's father's story, Stanley Bolesta, is that he also became a prisoner of war. And he ended up in the same prisoner of war camp as Nancy Putnam's father, George. Do I have that right, Nancy? If we could unmute Nancy.
There's Nancy. Hold on, Nancy.
Okay. Gerald Putnam.
Gerald Putnam. Sorry. And Ron, could you be recognized too? The two of you I put together in email and you chatted some.
Ron Bolesta. Yeah, Ron, you're there. Go ahead.
You know, my little finger going, hey.
Hi, Ron.
Hey, how are you?
So kind of an interesting coincidence here that we've got 2 people on whose fathers ended up in the same prisoner of war camp.
Well, in the same compound. They were, yeah.
Compound.
I would say the likelihood is we already know some of the people they both knew. So I would say they knew each other. They got there in close proximity as well.
Yeah. And I think Stanley Bolesta maybe got there a little bit earlier than Gerald.
Couple weeks ahead. He was shot down about 8 days before my dad, but my dad didn't get to Stalag Luft 1 till about March 22nd.
Yeah.
That got there a little earlier. Yeah.
And Ron sent me some photos and a few PowerPoint slides about his father. So let me put that up, Ron, and ask you to walk us through that. Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Let me fumble a couple of times. It's
okay.
My audience would not be pleased unless I made at least 2 technical mistakes per program. How's that? Huh?
Oh, there's that handsome young man. There you go.
Seems like anybody who went in the Air Force was handsome.
Always handsome, you know? Yeah, so this is a picture of my dad there, Stanley S. Bolesta, and he went to Bombardier School there in Chandler, Arizona in 1942, and he graduated from Bombardier, and then they transferred him to Barksdale Air Force Field, where he was assigned to a B-26 Marauder, and he took up navigation while he was there. And so everybody wants to have a little picture of your crew. And so I found a picture of the crew with his crew members. McLaughlin was the pilot, co-pilot was Ahern, and my dad, Bombardier navigator. And then you had Archer as the engineer and McNally as the radio gunner and Studdard as the armor guy in the back. So they practiced all together and were a crew, but that wasn't to be by the time he got to England. Do you want to pop the next slide?
Yeah, let me make that happen. Oops.
There you go.
Oh, there we go. Now I got it.
So Dad was shot down on his 13th mission, but on his 5th mission, he flew one mission in flak bait. It's very famous B-26 Marauder. If you can see up on the top right corner, you've got Mildred as the pilot, Grubb as the co-pilot, and then my dad, and then Rimmer, Lamb, and Cunningham. They switched him out. He has a totally new crew with him, and so he had to get used to them. They took the southern route up to get to England, and what's so good about flak bait is it's a little feather in your hat if you were with the 322nd 449th, because that was a combat plane that flew 202 combat missions in World War II. It had the most that any bomber ever flew with 202, and it's under restoration in a hangar down in Chantilly, Virginia, and the Smithsonian is looking to roll it out in the air in the museum there at the Air and Space Museum in 26, or maybe even, I just found out, maybe in 27. But Blackbait flew 3 missions on D-Day, so a lot of people like to know about D-Day, and many may not know what the B-26 contributed on D-Day. But everybody, I guess, kind of knows about Omaha Beach there. The Mighty 8th Air Force Diary indicated that there was 659 B-17s and 418 B-24s that arrived over the target. And they dropped 3,900 tons of bombs. But they were bombing at 16,000 to 20,000 feet. There was very heavy cloud cover. Their way of doing it, if the beach ran this way, they went perpendicular to the beach. Again, there was heavy cloud cover, and they got an order to delay the release of the bombs from 5 seconds to 30 seconds after passing over the target. So not one single piece of ordnance from the 8th Air Force fell anywhere near the beach.
Omaha Beach.
Oh, yes, on Omaha, correct. And so essentially that mission accomplished nothing. A book that I just got that was written about Utah Beach.
Yeah.
By Joseph Balkowski. They only fielded 239 Marauders from 7 different bomb groups, and they only dropped 582 tons of bombs versus the 3,096 tons of bombs. But they bombed at between 4,000 and 6,000 feet, and they flew under the clouds. And instead of going perpendicular, they were coming in like this, and they went parallel to the beach, and that's when they dropped their bombs. And because of that technique, all of their bombs, a lot of them hit within 500 feet of where they dropped them, and so the burden of the troops who were about to pour on the shore of the Utah Beach was greatly eased. They didn't have a mass number of people killed in casualties because of that. The story about calling the Marauders the Widowmakers is they're not calling them Widowmakers anymore. But I just thought that was really, really apropos in that they did such a great job, and the survival rate for those Utah Beach guys were really great because the Marauders were there.
It's always been a wonder to me why they didn't do the same thing at Omaha Beach as they did at Utah Beach. It would have been a much better outcome. So
Yeah,
Thank you for bringing that up, Ron. Let's move though to your father's story about his capture.
Yes. And so on his 13th mission, which was on November 3rd, he was shot down near Les Missiles Fugit. All of the crew members bailed out, and Dad was out of the 6. One was captured because he broke his ankle when he landed, and the other 5 took off. And Dad escaped and evaded for 5 weeks. And he was sheltered by the French underground at a Hector Lemaire family. And then that was on November the 3rd. And on December 17th, they were with a group of airmen being ready to be shepherded out of Paris, and were turned in by a mole, and the Gestapo caught him. And so he became a prisoner of war officially. And it took about 2 months to get to his POW site, which was Stalag Luft 1. Because they kept moving him from interrogation site to interrogation site to find out why. As I said, they thought he was a spy, but he seemed to he talked them out of it at the end. So he's here because of that.
And this is a drawing of his. Your father was somewhat of an artist.
Well, he was an artist trying to learn how to draw. Yes, I did I spent 500 hours developing and researching all of the B-26 guys that were POWs in World War II, and so this book, he had his own POW book, and it's in the B-26 POWs.com. Anybody can go to that site. If you type Bolesta, you can look and you'll see a 63-page book of a guy that was in Stalag Luft 1. You get to see the drawings that he handmade. You get to see all the writings that he wrote down from individuals contributing to that book. You get to see what he had for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. Because he worked in the cafeteria, he wrote down what was the diet for the day. And a lot of days it was called fresh flesh was the item on the meal. Mostly it was potatoes. That's where he got most of his substance from. When he left, he started and had he was at 170 pounds when he was there, and when he got out, he was down to 135. And this is an officer's camp, and they tried to take care of him, but there was no food there, and everybody in that whole camp experienced that hunger that was there.
Let me bring Nancy back into this conversation about Stalag Luft 1.
Yes.
So Nancy and Ron, at the end of the war, I think I understand that the POWs in Stalag Luft 1 were not marched around like most of the others.
No, they stayed put. Colonel Zemke, who was the senior Allied officer, basically refused the orders to march. And if you look at a map of Germany, Barth is very isolated. It's way up north on the Baltic Sea, whereas Stalag Luft 3, where Maryland and 10,000 POWs were, and then all the others, they were interior to Poland and Germany. Barth was just isolated enough that they could get away with it, honestly. And they had a very strong commander. So they were not marched.
You might.
Ron is correct. There was very little food until the last couple of weeks when they got found some Red Cross packages.
You might describe who Zemke was. I'm sure Colin can.
Zemke,
Yeah.
this is his book. I'm sure Colin knows it and Ron knows it.
I knew Hub quite well.
Yeah,
Trust me.
I know. I know a lot of people who have interviewed him. His son is pretty active in a lot of our groups. So, Mark. Yeah. So he was the senior Allied commander. He was a fighter pilot, shot down, and whatever the senior officer was that came into a camp, he assumed the command position.
Let's just say a strong personality.
Yeah, very much so. He was considered somewhat of a son of a bitch, but my dad said he saved our hide. My dad knew him very well. He was a senior officer in the senior officer group in his in North Compound 1, which is where Ron's father was. I haven't looked at their barracks numbers, Ron, but I bet they were definitely neighbors.
Yeah, I think his was 10. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jimmy Doolittle said Hub Zemke and Don Blakesley were the two best fighter leaders in the European theater, but he said Hub Zemke was the best leader, regardless whether air or ground or armor. He said Zemke was the guy that he would want to be following if he were a subordinate rank.
Yes, my father would agree. I mean, there were all.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Hans Scharf at the interrogation center had Zemke's picture on the wall waiting for him to show up. That's how well known he was.
That's pretty arrogant.
Solid Luft 1, we had, my dad was at 3, of course, but we always know 1 is where all the really the fighter races went. You had a lot of them at Solid Luft 1, right, Nancy?
Yeah, but they also had and Ron's father knew him as well, Ross Greening, who was a B-20, flew on one of Doolittle's Raiders.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's right.
Up flying in Europe, got shot down. I think he was out of North Africa with the 12th. I think, Marilyn, is that correct?
I think so.
Got shot down.
Yeah, we had a couple of Raiders at 3 as well, and we knew that Greening was the one that was at 1.
Right, but he was well known as an artist, and Ron's father, according to what I've read, took art lessons from him. Yeah, he's a great book with all his drawings. Just quite a guy.
I took a quick look at Ron's website, B26POWs.com, and looked at his father's POW book. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
I tagged it for something I want to put aside and read when I have the chance. It's very, very good. Listen, if we could take our break now, it's 8:08. We missed it by 8 minutes. Sean, are you still with us?
I am here. Yes, I will pull up our sponsors. This will go real quick because I know we have a couple things to get to here before the end of the program. So we're going to thank Tobacco-Free Adagio Health for their continued support. They are dedicated to preventing and reducing tobacco use, educating people about the hazards of tobacco use, and advocating for healthier places to live, work, and play. Check them out at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. Also want to thank UPMC for Life. They can help you make sense of Medicare and get the answers and information you need, such as how to choose the Medicare Advantage plan that's right for you. They have plans designed for veterans, by veterans, and can save you money and get you more benefits. Check out all of your plan options by going upmchealthplan.com/Medicare. Thank you both to those sponsors. This is our current VBC magazine, asking what is a veteran? And these are free quarterly magazines that we send out. We send them out to every address we have. So if you don't get one, it's because we don't have your address. Please send that to us. We will be happy to send you a copy of the magazine. The next issue, the winter issue, will be hitting the printers here in the next couple of weeks. So look forward to that. And we have several programs coming up in the next couple of weeks. Monday night, Vietnam POW John Ewell will be joining us. He was shot down during in December. So we're hitting sort of the anniversary of his shoot down date. He'll be joining us Monday night. Next Thursday night, we'll be discussing more about the Battle of the Bulge, 1944-45, with Glenn here on Thursday night. And our last in-person breakfast will be at Christ United Methodist Church on Saturday, December 21st. It's always a very well attended event and a great program for all. But look forward to all of that coming up, and then we'll take a little holiday break, and we will be back in the new year with many more BBC events.
If I could just promote my program next week, every time I think I know something about World War II, somebody sends me a book and proves to me I know nothing. This is actually a novel called Jeep Show, written by a very interesting man who I've talked to, Bob O'Connor. And Jeep Show refers to the fact that the USO would send Jeeps out to the front lines to entertain squads and platoons within shooting distance of the front lines. One GI with an M1 rifle and 3 entertainers. And this book is about exactly that during the Battle of the Bulge. And a lot of it includes one Mickey Rooney, was one of the guys in the Jeep Show, and he's involved in the Battle of the Bulge. So I don't read too many works of fiction anymore, but I have to tell you, I really enjoyed this one, and a really different understanding of the Battle of the Bulge from Mickey Rooney's point of view. Okay, so let's stop for a moment and invite questions from the audience or anything in the chat room to this point in our B-26 story.
Anybody would like to just wave their hand here in front of the screen, I'll be able to see you if you have a question.
David Johns, I think, down there in the right.
David Johns. They might be different on my screen, but I will find you, David.
I got him.
Okay, great. Thank you, Glenn.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, the reason I just found out about this and what caught my attention was the B-26. And it turns out my dad was one that built B-26s during the war. So that's what he did. And the most fascinating part that my dad had was all his relationship and meeting General Doolittle, because Doolittle was trying at one time to get the B-26 to be the plane that he would use to go to Tokyo. Yeah. And my dad remembers the many, many times they had to build and configure the different wings trying to get the planes to take off in a certain distance, okay, yeah. Which they never were able to accomplish it. And so it was only after the raid that my dad really knew what Doolittle's purpose was. And he said he remembers a number of hours that they spent trying to get these planes to take off within a certain distance. And so, and then I guess the other part, my dad was also, I'm not sure whether he got a patent, but he got an award for developing a system where they would, the bombs on the B-26 could be sent in different configurations. You could drop a certain number. There was a lot of different variations on how you could drop the bombs. And it took many, many man hours for them to test that in the factory. And my dad came up with a system and some devices that would do that very quickly. So he got an award for being able to save a significant number of man hours in the testing of the bomb drop system. Yeah. And of course,
who did he work for, David?
I don't really know. My dad died several years ago, so he lived to be 92, and most of what he told me was all the jokes that they played on one another in the factory, and of course the other thing he said that when the war was over, they tried to get my dad to stay and go to college, and I was actually born there. When my parents were in that area near the Martin Aircraft Factory. I think there was an Edgewater. I can't remember exactly. They lived someplace. I was born there. And so, but their desire was, they grew up on the farm. And so as soon as the war was over, all he thought about was going back to the farm. So that's what happened. But my dad did okay. But
well, thank you, David. It's always good to remember that not all of our World War II heroes were in the front lines. A lot of them were back home building all this equipment.
Right. I was actually in the I was a Vietnam veteran. I was a member of the 11th Armored Cavalry, the Black Horse Regiment in 66, 67. And so, and then also later on, I was part of the Markel Division. So, and I reached the rank of lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve program. But that was, but I was active duty. My whole Vietnam career was active duty there.
Thank you, David. Is this your first time coming on the Veterans Breakfast Club program?
Yeah, I just found out about it a week ago. I don't know, I don't know what happens. I guess I saw the article about the B-26 and I said, oh, that rings a bell. And so, and we had a dinner tonight, so I couldn't get in until the last minute. I was thinking that, oh, I'd like to have heard the whole thing because I'd like to learn more about what you had on the story about the B-26, because that was my dad's experience building them.
Thank you. Well, please don't be a stranger. Please look up our website, veteransbreakfastclub.com. Register with us. Send us your contact information. We'd love to have you on more in the future.
Okay, well, thank you.
And Glenn, real quick, you did have our mission statement earlier from the B-26, and we do honor and support and invite all members of the B-26 from the manufacturing design to the ones in the war. So please feel free to find us on our Facebook or our website for Mr. Jones, B-26, B-26MHS.org. Yep.
Yeah, I think we put it in the chat. I know we meant to. Let me clear up something too, because it occasionally has been confusing to me. B-26 Marauder versus what Doolittle flew off of the aircraft, the Hornet, was the B-25.
Right.
That's right.
Mitchell.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Correct.
Slightly, I mean, if you looked at them from afar and didn't know, much about them, you may be confused the two, but they were two very different airplanes, although both two-engine bombers.
Yeah,
B-25 had the split tail.
Yeah.
Right. Doolittle's choice was the B-26, but he just couldn't get it to work. So that's why he went to the B-25.
Yeah. That's something I did not know, that he actually tried to modify the 26.
Yeah, they built several different models with different wing spans to be able to see if they could get it off in the time. So that's what my dad worked on.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience that we could answer? Yes, I see somebody holding up.
That's me. That's some of that artwork on the B-25 taken off of.
Turn it around the other way. There you go.
There you go.
There you go. There's Doolittle taking off from the Hornet. Yeah.
And you did that with greening? Did he do that with greening?
That's the exact same drawing that he drew with greening. So they did it at the same time.
Yeah.
Great.
Took some art lessons. Yeah.
And Glenn, I also want to bring attention to Daniel Lindsay here in the chat. Has mentioned here in the chat that he's with his father's navigator's nephew who died on a plane from flak. Daniel, I ask you to unmute. We can't see your face. I'm not sure if you have a green screen. There you go.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I invited my my dad's navigator's nephew to join us today. I don't know if he's come on board though. The nephew, or I'm sorry, his uncle died that day in August of '43 when they were engaged by both flak and fighters. They were shot up by a Focke-Wulf 190 along with flak. But fortunately, my dad made it out with the aid of the French underground. But his uncle died in the plane, and that crashed in France that day.
What was your dad's name?
My dad's name was Andrew Lindsay. He was a co-pilot that day when he was flying a bird called the Payoff. He was supposed to fly his regular plane called Shadrach, but it had a turbocharger problem at the last minute. So they did a plane swap, and because of that, after they got shot down, German intelligence was extremely good in those days. So when that airplane went down, the Germans were all over the place looking for the squadron commander because that's whose plane it was.
How do you spell your last name? Lindsay?
Say.
Say. And then what date did he get shot down?
22 August of '43. So the way I got connected to this was I ended up writing an email to the 386 bomb group several years ago. And eventually I heard back from a guy named Charles Clyer. He called himself Clyer the Flyer. And he was the unit historian for the 386. This was back in the days when they were flying out of the 8th Air Force in southern England. And so it took a couple of years, but I finally heard back from them. And I posed a very simple question. I said, has anybody heard about an airplane that went down in August 22nd of 43? And Chester came back and said, yeah, I wrote a story about your dad's airplane several years ago. And he forwarded a bunch of information to me, including a copy of the article. But what really amazed me about that was the archives in America are phenomenal as far as how much information we have on the war. He had information on, everybody's payload, who was carrying a camera, what the formation looked like, time over target, all this information. They've thrown nothing away. So if you want information on anything in the war, it's amazing how much stuff is still there in Washington. I've also gotten some information from it, like a casualty report, but my dad finally got out through Morocco in February of 44, but he was on the ground for about 6 months recovering. He'd gotten burned as he had to bail out through the Bombay doors because everything else was shut down because of loss of hydraulic fluid.
Well, thank you, Daniel, for coming on and sharing that. Where are you linking in from?
I normally live in Santa Barbara, up in the mountains right now, enjoying the winter weather, Northern California.
Well, last time I was in Northern California, it was like 16 feet of snow. I had to stay there a lot longer than was planned.
I only got a half a foot today.
16 might be a little exaggeration, but yeah.
We got a great program here. I learned about this from a buddy of mine he and I were in the Air Force together, and he clued me in about this program. So this was really useful.
Well,
Daniel, make sure to reach out to us. Give us an email, and we'll make sure to keep connecting with you.
You bet, we'll do.
I'd love that email because I would like to connect with him with somebody that might be able to help him with his father's escape route.
Yeah, I'll just give you my email. It's really easy. It's one of my old call signs when I was in the Air Force. It's edgy01@aol.com. That's edgy, EDGY01@aol.com.
Do us a favor, Daniel, and just type that into the chat.
Will do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, thanks guys for putting this together. Good job.
Well, and Daniel, look for B-26 Marauders Part 2. I think February the 6th of next year, because it's obvious here at 8:23 we're not going to get to either Josh or Nick's stories about their relatives.
Yeah,
and they're very good ones. Nick's book, of course, is very good. Josh's story just flabbergasted me about his grandfather. His grandfather flew a B-26 out of Midway.
Oh, wow.
During the Battle of Midway, which just incredible story. So Josh, we'll get to that next time with you, Nick.
Yeah, I was very lucky to be able to touch base with several of my dad's crew members, thanks to Charles Clyer with the historical group. So I was actually able to talk to his tail gunner and other people about what happened after they hit the ground. And fascinating stories all these guys have,
Glenn, I'd like to say a quick hello to Jerry Augustine, who was, I believe his father, must have been his father, flew with my grandfather, not in the same plane, but in the same bomb group. So.
Oh, the 95th. Jerry.
22nd bomb group.
Jerry, could you unmute?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Which bomb group was that again?
22nd bomb group. So Jerry's father would have been in Australia, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you have the wrong one.
Wrong guy.
Maybe. Okay, same name.
No problem.
Now, Jerry was with us on our trip to England back in September. And I'm not going to tell that story, Jerry. I'll tell the other story. Now, we had a great time with Jerry and his wife. I'm sorry, Jerry, I've forgotten your wife's name.
Betty.
Betty.
Betty. Yep.
She's a saint, Betty. I mean, Jerry, obviously to be married to you, Jerry. But no, we visited Jerry's father's bomb group base in England, which
It was my uncle, Tom Kennedy.
Your uncle, okay.
That's all right. He was from Rochester, New York.
Right.
And he flew his 25 missions in Baltimore on a B-17.
Right. And that was the 95th bomb group.
Yes.
And in East Anglia, not too far from the 100th that we visited as well.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Good to see you, Jerry. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else with any questions we could dive into here in the last couple of minutes?
Bob von Bargen, the B-26 has a feature I have not seen on any other aircraft. It has an astrodome for navigation that can be folded down and leaving the top smooth. This improves flight performance. Could this be changed in flight, or was it a maintenance action?
Very good question, Bob.
I'm not sure anybody else has the answer. I know that for when the airplane's on the ground, the top does pop open for air and ventilation kind of a thing, but I don't know of any navigator astrodome.
Bob, you want to elaborate on that? Let me unmute you, Bob. I'll ask him to unmute. Bob was a navigator in the U.S. Air Force in the 50s and 60s. When we did a program a little bit earlier this year on B-17 navigation, and Harry Crosby, the famous navigator for the 100th Bomb Group, Bob was our intimate consultant. Bob, what were you looking for there in that question?
I noticed on one of the pictures that you sent out ahead of the meeting, and I was wondering, on the crew, and obviously on a tactical mission such as that, you don't need a navigator, but you've got to get that airplane across the ocean. And on one of the shots, it shows in the compartment behind the pilots, it shows 2 seats. And then in another picture, I guess, these are different models, there's 1 seat behind in that compartment. And then I was surprised to see that there was an astrodome and it was hanging down as if it was on a hinge coming down. And then if you look at the top of the 26, you see that there's a round hole there. Now, my question was, I've never seen that on any other airplane. And I wondered, could that be pushed back up in flight, or it's a strange thing. I've never seen anything like it before.
Josh, you're the closest we have to an expert on this.
I'm not the expert there. I'm not sure if Ron or Nick know, but I do not know of this navigator position.
Nick, any comment?
I'm not aware. I've seen that circle, as you say. In fact, I do remember like a photograph on the ground. The guy took the photo. He stuck his head out and took the photograph of the airplanes behind him through that cubby hole. Now, I don't know why it was there. I don't know if it had glass under it, and maybe they could do celestial navigation or shoot the stars or something like that.
Yeah.
And therefore they maybe had a glass plate that popped down underneath that, and that other one was a protective cover over it. I am not sure.
If he shot a picture, he shot that through the astrodome, because he certainly didn't want to stick his head out.
My understanding, it was a ground maintenance issue where they would change that out before a mission.
That's what I would think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I like that shadow box you have above your head. That is fantastic.
That's a summary of my career.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Explain that for us, Nick.
Well, when I retired, I I put all my medals and insignia and my ribbon rack and my everything I could think of on either side of that. Of course, it's shaped like an eagle because I retired as an 06, a colonel. But I had enlisted time in the Air Force. I was retired a colonel in the Army. And I just put everything together. I've always wanted to do that at the end of my career, just to show as a summary what I did and where I was.
Beautiful. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, Bob. I talked to Nick several times and never caught it. That's very, very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, listen, we're at the witching hour. Obviously, we did not get to 2 stories, which I kind of thought we may not get to 1, but we didn't get to 2. Josh's grandfather, Battle of Midway, B-26, and Nick's book, Back from 44, the story of his uncle flying the B-26, or a crew member of the B-26. Interestingly enough, and again, how much there is to learn about World War II, he flew out of Sardinia and Corsica first.
Correct, and then out of Dijon on his last missions.
Yeah, yeah. So if you think about the map of the Mediterranean, they were based first in Sardinia in the south, flying to Italy for southern targets, and then they moved to Corsica later in the war campaign in Italy and flew northern missions in Italy, as well as from Sardinia, from Corsica, they flew to southern France, right, to support the
yes, they did. He actually participated, his bomb group and several bomb groups on Sardinia participated in Operation Dragoon, which was the invasion of southern France in August of 44. Right. So he was a part of that pre-bombing, pre-landing bombing, and then the post-landing. They supported missions there, and then they went back to hitting targets in Italy.
Yeah, yeah. And then they finally transferred the group to France.
Right. They were just getting too far away from their targets. So
yeah. Well, that will be, I'm pretty sure it's the February 6th show. We would have it earlier, but Nick is actually going to France for the 80th anniversary ceremony. Is that right, Nick?
That is correct. It's going to be outside of Dijon, and I am one of the honored guests, I guess. I'm one of the only family members of all the crew that they've been able to get a hold of. But I'll be there for the ceremony for the 80th memorial service.
And Nick's promised me that if he needs a bag carrier, I'm his first choice.
All right, not a problem.
Well, listen, thank you to everybody. Nick, Josh, Ron, thank you very much. Our sort of color commentary people, if you will, Marilyn, Colin, Nancy, thank you for contributing as much as you always do. It's much, much appreciated. This has been a fun hour and a half. It's been a fun couple of weeks for me digging into the story of the B-26 because I knew so little. More to come in February. These men should be recognized just as much as the B-7, the heavy bomber guys and the fighter pilots and so forth. Their courage and bravery was an example to all of us, and many of them gave the supreme sacrifice, like Nick's uncle, that we'll hear about his story. So I'm glad that we could bring out just a little bit of this story to our audience. Thank you for being with us. Sean?
Thank you all. Thank you, Glenn. We will see you all Monday night. And have a good evening. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.